Hello and welcome to Books Wale Bhaiya. I'm Abhishek. At the very outset, let me wish you a very happy Independence Day. It's indeed a special moment for all of us Indians as India is celebrating its 75th Independence Day. We got freedom 75 years back on 15th August 1947. And it is in this context that I'll talk about books which help us understand about Indian freedom and Indian partition. I'm saying them together because it's an unfortunate truth that India's freedom and from British rule and India's partition went hand in hand. The books I'll be discussing today are not exactly about India's freedom struggle, as that has been going on for about 100 years or so, especially since the revolt of 1857. But this book is about the circumstances, situations surrounding India's freedom and its partition. Keep watching. The first book I'm talking about is Freedom at Midnight by Dominic Lapierre and Larry Collins. I can very well say that this is perhaps the most read book on India's partition. This is usually the first book people read on India's partition, or the most popular, perhaps the most sold book on India's partition, and one of the most reviewed as well, you can say. So this book is about by two foreign journalists, Dominic Lapierre and Larry Collins, and yes, they give you a lot of insight about the time of India's freedom, you can say about a year before India's freedom and a few months after that till the time of Mahatma Gandhi's death and the subsequent trial and hanging of Nathuram Godse. So this book, yes, it offers you great insights into what were the situations, but importantly, this book tells you about the personalities. So it tells you in detail about Mahatma Gandhi, about Pandit Nehru, about Lord Mountbatten, about Muhammad Ali Jinnah, about Sardar Patel, as they are the key people during India's independence and partition. So while this book offers you great insights, as I say, for example, it starts with the time of when the first British ship landed on the Indian shores. From that time, how the Britain started to gain hold over India. It offers insights such as many of the British kids lost their lives because as British was trying to expand their presence, that there were people, especially kids, who were not accustomed to the climate and eventually unfortunately died. So it tells you the price British was also paid for establishing this empire on the Indian subcontinent. So this book starts from about a year before, you can say, the grant of independence, a year or so before, when Prime Minister Attlee was in his room and was a little worried because Britain's financial condition was not very good after the war, and they were looking forward to actually exit the jewel in the British crown, which was India. Then it tells you all the events which took place and how they appointed Lord Mountbatten and what negotiations he had with the Indian leaders. It tells you a lot of details about the events surrounding partition, about Muhammad Ali Jinnah, or the problems the country faced, or the problems, you can say, the price India also paid for its freedom. So while it gives you a lot of details, a lot of insights, one big drawback of this book is that it suffers from a bias. The authors are very much biased towards Lord Mountbatten, almost eulogizing him, but the truth is, and has been discovered in many other books, Lord Mountbatten was no friend of India. He had only British interest in mind, and the way he had been sent and the way he managed the entire this partition was not at all commendable. However, the Britishers may say something different, but it's believed that even Lord Mountbatten, in one of the interviews he gave in future, admitted that what he did was a disaster. So the drawback of this book is that yes, it suffers from a bias. It conveniently ignores many a thing which as an Indians, or you can say, we should be knowing, we should having the answers to. Despite its drawbacks, I would say it covers a lot of ground. It gives you a lot of details. For many people, as I said, it is the first book they read in its partition. But I would say this can be the first book, but this should not be your last book on India's partition. There's a lot to explore and a lot to know. And if you read this, you will get somewhat a bit of a wrong picture about the role of Britishers. The second book I'm going to talk about is The Partition of India and Inquest by Madhav Godbole. So Madhavji is a retired Indian civil servant, and he has written this book about 20 years back, if I'm not wrong. Now this book does not suffer from the biases the first book, Freedom at Midnight, suffers from. He is of course an Indian, and he has Indian interest in mind, and importantly, while he also covers a lot of details about partitions, his focus also a bit on personalities, what were the key people at the time of Indian independence and partition and what role they played. It gives you a detailed account of the various atrocities and massacres. So at times in some pages you can say it becomes a bit overwhelming reading about all the murders, rapes, loot and whatnot. However, the unfortunate truth is that all of this is true. He's not made up any of this. Yes, it also covers the circumstances, the situations of by the Britishers, by the Indians in lot of detail, which makes it a very readable, a very important book on India's partition. But the best part of this book is chapter 5 and chapter 6, in which in chapter 5 he talks about what the Britishers could have done differently, and he puts the blame on Lord Mountbatten, importantly, that he in a way was responsible for the mess India faced. And in chapter 6 he talks about the problems, you can say, after partition, the problems India is facing currently, looking at them from the point of view of this historical context of Indian independence, as well as the future we have and the present situation. Important point of this book is that this book does not show any particular political inclination. It does not speak in favor of British. He criticizes Mountbatten, and interestingly, while many commentators say that Muhammad Ali Jinnah, as we all know, that he was about to die in the next few months, so the partition could have been saved, he says that this was perhaps partition was somewhat inevitable, and therefore he doesn't blame Pandit Nehru and Sardar Patel for having this inclination or having this desire to get India free anyhow. A lot of important insights, and especially I said what his views on partition and the British rule, which is in chapter 5 and 6, are the most important parts of this book. And all in all, I must say, a very important read on India's partition. The third book, The Shadow of the Great Game, The Untold Story of India's Partition, by Narinder Singh Sarela. So he was the ADC to Lord Mountbatten, and he also became a foreign service officer and had been India's ambassador to many countries. So this book gives you not a different perspective on partition, but a perspective which is, I would say, very important, and you can say to an extent not very well covered in other books. It talks about the Great Game, the struggle for a world supremacy between Britain and Russia, and its consequence on the Indian subcontinent. So it talks about the fact that when Britishers were about to leave, or they were contemplating to leave, they still wanted an area which they could use as an area of influence to ensure that the Russian government, Russia as a country, does not reach the area surrounding India, and thus the idea of Pakistan, because they understood that India as a country would not allow its soil to be used for any such diplomatic or military overtures, and thus they conceived the idea of Pakistan, or if they did not conceive, at least they helped Muhammad Ali Jinnah have this idea and have it say in getting Pakistan. So while all of us lay the blame on Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Muslim League for India's partition, and he undoubtedly was a very important factor for India's partition, this book makes it clear that it was the Britishers' great game and their policies which led to India's division. This is a fact which I guess nobody today denies. One drawback of this book is that it remains somewhat silent on Lord Mountbatten's mistakes. In fact, to an extent, you can say it's pro-Lord Mountbatten to an extent. And as I mentioned earlier, Lord Mountbatten was no friend of India, and his policies actually created a lot of mess. Nonetheless, his understanding and his explanation of the great game of the geopolitical situation that time, which led to India's division, is definitely worth reading. Something, as I said, is not covered in details in many other books written on India's partition. All in all, 3 books with some drawbacks, some biases here and there, but I would say all in all, very important books to understand India's partition and India's independence. Please note, these books are not exactly on India's freedom struggle, because as I said, freedom struggle is something that started long back. These books are usually about the period of, you can say, 1945 or 46 to India's independence, and like some of the books cover the period till Mahatma Gandhi's murder. All in all, if you want to know about India's history, India's independence, I would suggest all these 3 books are very well written and gives you a lot of insights and information about the Indian history. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you think I did a good job, please give a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more updates. And once again, wishing you all a very happy Independence Day. Thank you.